Dr. Phil's hand trembled slightly as he held the envelope. The studio, usually filled with the hum of cameras and whispered producer notes, had gone completely silent. Every eye in the room was locked on that single piece of paper, a secret 15 years in the making, about to shatter everything a family thought they knew. But to understand why this moment mattered, we have to go back. Back to where it all started to fall apart. The Harrison family looked like any other American family. Tom, the father, a construction foreman with calloused hands and tired eyes. Janet, the mother, a nurse who worked double shifts to keep the lights on. And between them, an empty chair where their daughter Emily used to sit. 15 years ago, Emily left home at 17. No note. No explanation. Just gone. And in those 15 years, the silence between Tom and Janet had grown so thick you could cut it with a knife. She chose to leave, Tom would say, his jaw set, arms crossed. You drove her away. Janet would fire back, tears streaming down her face. The same argument. The same wounds. Over and over. Until the day they walked onto Dr. Phil's stage, not holding hands, not even looking at each other. They sat 3 feet apart, an ocean of hurt between them. Dr. Phil leaned forward in his chair, that signature look of concern mixed with determination on his face. How long has it been since you two had a real conversation? Tom stared at the floor. Janet twisted a tissue in her hands. 6 months, Janet whispered. We live in the same house, but we don't talk. And you, Dr. Phil turned to Tom. You blame your wife for your daughter leaving. I don't blame. Tom started then stopped. His voice cracked. I just want to know why. Why did Emily run? What did we do? The question hung in the air like a weight pressing down on everyone in the room. And that's when Dr. Phil did something no one expected. Subscribe and leave a comment. Because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead. Dr. Phil stood up. Not his usual measured movement to emphasize a point, but something urgent. He walked toward the side of the stage where his senior producer stood with a headset and clipboard. Stop the tape, Dr. Phil said quietly, but every microphone in the studio picked it up. The cameras kept rolling. They always do. But the energy shifted. This wasn't scripted. This wasn't part of the plan. Tom and Janet looked at each other for the first time in the entire taping, confusion replacing their anger for just a moment. Dr. Phil spoke in low tones to his producer, then turned back to the audience. I'm about to make a decision that's going to change how we do this segment. Tom, Janet, I need you to trust me for the next few minutes. Janet's hand moved toward Tom's. She stopped halfway. What's happening? I made a promise to someone, Dr. Phil said, returning to his chair. A promise that if you two ever agreed to come on this show, I would deliver a message. A message that's been waiting for 15 years. Tom's face went pale. From Emily? Dr. Phil nodded slowly. 3 months ago, Emily reached out to my team. She's been watching you two for years. Watching you hurt. Watching you blame each other. And she couldn't stay silent anymore. He pulled out an envelope from inside his jacket. White, slightly worn at the edges, sealed with red wax. Before I open this, I need to tell you something. What's in here might be hard to hear. It might change everything you think you know. But Emily asked me to tell you that she loves you both. She's always loved you both. Janet's tears started before the envelope was even opened. Tom reached over, finally, and took her hand. Dr. Phil broke the seal. The sound of tearing paper echoed through the silent studio. He pulled out a single sheet, handwritten in blue ink, and began to read. Dear Mom and Dad, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for the 15 years of silence. I'm sorry for the pain. But I need you to know the truth. The night I left, I didn't run away because you were bad parents. I ran because I was pregnant. Janet gasped. Tom's head dropped into his hands. I was 17 and terrified. Dr. Phil continued reading, his voice steady but gentle. I thought you'd be disappointed. I thought you'd be ashamed. So I left before you could reject me. I went to Aunt Linda's in Oregon. And I had a beautiful baby girl. Your granddaughter. Her name is Sophie. She just turned 14. The studio erupted, not in applause, but in a collective gasp that seemed to pull all the oxygen from the room. This wasn't just a confession. This was a revelation that rewrote an entire family's history. Dr. Phil set the letter down. Tom. Janet. Emily is here. She's been backstage this entire time. She brought Sophie with her. And if you're ready, if you want to meet them, they're willing to come out right now. Tom looked at Janet. Janet looked at Tom. And for the first time in 15 years, they were on the same page. Yes, they said together. Yes. Dr. Phil turned to the side entrance. Bring them out. The door opened. A young woman with Janet's eyes and Tom's stubborn chin walked out first, holding the hand of a teenage girl with braces and nervous energy. Emily looked older than her 32 years, the weight of 15 years of guilt carved into the lines around her eyes. But when she saw her parents stand up from their chairs, something broke open inside her. Mom, Emily whispered. Dad. Janet moved first. She practically ran across the stage, arms outstretched, and pulled Emily into an embrace so fierce it looked like she'd never let go. Tom followed, wrapping both of them in his broad arms, his shoulders shaking with sobs he'd held in for over a decade. Sophie stood to the side uncertain, until Dr. Phil gently guided her forward. Sophie, meet your grandparents. Tom looked up, his face wet with tears, and held out his hand to the granddaughter he never knew existed. Sophie took it, tentative at first, then found herself pulled into the family embrace. Four people, connected by blood and pain and love, finally whole again. The audience was on their feet. Not cheering. Not clapping. Just standing in witness to something sacred. Dr. Phil stepped back, letting the family have their moment. His eyes, usually sharp and analytical, were soft. This was why he did the work. Not for the ratings. Not for the drama. For moments like this, when broken things were made whole again. After what felt like both seconds and hours, the family separated just enough to breathe. Emily turned to Dr. Phil, her voice thick with emotion. Thank you? Thank you for keeping your promise. Dr. Phil nodded. I told you I would. And I want you to know, all of you, that this is just the beginning. We've arranged for family counseling. We've set up resources. Because healing doesn't happen in one hug. It happens in the work you do every single day after this. Tom wiped his face with his sleeve. We'll do the work. Whatever it takes. Janet looked at Sophie, really looked at her, and smiled through her tears. You look just like your mother at that age. Sophie laughed, a nervous, beautiful sound. She has pictures. I've always wanted to meet you. Well, Janet said, pulling her close. You're not getting rid of us now. Dr. Phil let them sit together on the stage. The four of them squeezed onto the two guest chairs meant for two. He addressed the camera directly, his voice taking on that signature tone of wisdom earned through decades of helping people. I want to talk to everyone watching at home. How many of you are carrying a secret? How many of you are letting pride or fear keep you from the people you love? Tom and Janet lost 15 years because their daughter was afraid to tell them the truth. Emily lost 15 years because she thought her parents would reject her. And Sophie grew up without grandparents because nobody had the courage to say what needed to be said. He paused, letting that sink in. Don't wait 15 years. Don't wait 15 days. If there's someone you need to talk to, if there's something you need to say, say it. Because life is too short, and family is too precious, to waste on silence. The camera panned back to the Harrison family, no longer broken, no longer silent, but together. Emily had her head on her mother's shoulder. Tom had his arm around Sophie. And in the middle of it all was the envelope, now open and empty, its purpose fulfilled. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten. 6 months later, Dr. Phil's team followed up with the Harrisons. Tom had retired early to spend more time with his granddaughter. Janet had reduced her nursing shifts. Emily and Sophie had moved back to their home state, just 20 minutes from Tom and Janet's house. They had Sunday dinners every week. They went to Sophie's basketball games together. They talked, really talked, about the past, the present, and the future. And on Sophie's 15th birthday, Tom gave her a gift. It was framed and wrapped in silver paper. When she opened it, she found the envelope, the one Dr. Phil had held that day in the studio, with a small plaque underneath that read, "The day our family came home." Sophie looked up at her grandfather, confused. "Why this?" Tom knelt down to her level, his eyes warm. "Because that envelope held 15 years of pain, but it also held the truth. And the truth, even when it hurts, is what sets us free. I want you to remember that sometimes the hardest thing to do is also the most important thing to do." Sophie hugged him tight. "I love you, Grandpa." "I love you too, kiddo." Dr. Phil never forgot the Harrison family either. Years later, in interviews and speeches, he would reference that episode as one of the most powerful moments in his career. Not because of the drama. Not because of the tears. But because it proved something he'd always believed, that no family is too broken to be fixed, no silence too long to be broken, and no confession too painful to heal. The envelope became a symbol. Not just for the Harrisons, but for everyone who watched that episode and saw themselves in the story. Thousands of letters poured into Dr. Phil's show from people who had been inspired to reach out to estranged family members, to confess long-held secrets, to bridge gaps they thought were too wide to cross. One letter, from a woman in Ohio, read, "I watched the Harrison family episode and realized I'd been silent for 8 years. I called my sister that night. We cried for 2 hours. We're having coffee next week. Thank you for showing me it's never too late." Another, from a man in Texas. "I thought my son hated me. Turns out he thought I hated him. We both watched your show on the same night in different cities and texted each other at the same time. We're rebuilding what we almost lost." That envelope saved more than one family. Dr. Phil kept those letters in a folder in his office. On hard days, when the work felt heavy and the problems felt insurmountable, he would read them and remember why he did what he did. Because sometimes, all it takes is one person willing to hold space for the truth. One person willing to say, "Stop the tape. This matters more than the show." One person willing to hand someone an envelope and say, "It's time." The Harrison family's story didn't end that day on stage. It began there. And every Sunday dinner, every basketball game, every shared laugh and healed wound was a testament to what's possible when people choose love over fear, truth over silence, and connection over pride. That's the legacy of the envelope. That's the power of a confession. And that's why Dr. Phil does what he does, not for the spectacle, but for the sacred moments when broken families become whole again. In his private office after the taping, Dr. Phil sat alone for a moment, the way he always did after particularly emotional episodes. He thought about Emily's courage to reach out after 15 years of silence. He thought about Tom and Janet's willingness to be vulnerable on national television. And he thought about Sophie, a 14-year-old girl who finally got to meet the grandparents she'd only seen in old photographs. His assistant knocked gently. "Dr. Phil? The family wants to thank you before they leave." He stood up, straightened his tie, and walked back to the green room where the Harrisons were gathered. They were sitting together on a couch, Sophie sandwiched between her grandparents, Emily's head resting on her father's shoulder. When Dr. Phil entered, they all looked up with faces that had been transformed, still tear-stained, but radiant with hope. "I just wanted to say," Tom began, his voice rough with emotion, "that you gave us back something we thought was gone forever. You gave us our family." Dr. Phil smiled, that genuine smile that rarely appeared on camera. "I didn't give you anything. You all did the hard work. Emily had the courage to write that letter. You two had the courage to come here. Sophie had the courage to meet strangers who turned out to be family. All I did was hold the envelope. But you kept your promise," Emily said softly. "When I reached out 3 months ago, I was terrified you'd say no. That you'd think it was too personal, too messy." "This work is personal," Dr. Phil replied. "It's supposed to be messy. Real healing always is." And I want you all to remember something. Today was beautiful, but it was also just the beginning. You're going to have hard days. There will be moments when old wounds try to reopen. That's when you have to choose each other all over again. Janet nodded, squeezing Sophie's hand. We will. We're not losing each other again. As the Harrison family left the studio that day, they walked out together, not as strangers, not as people broken by silence, but as a family choosing to rebuild. The cameras had stopped rolling hours ago, but their story was far from over. It was, in many ways, just beginning.